Hey guys, welcome to Graves Grades. It's a YouTube channel where I'll discuss films I've seen recently and throwback films from the 80s, 90s, 70s. Just review movies basically and give you my opinions on them. Today we're going to be reviewing The Witch, so let's just jump straight into it. So The Witch, directed by Robert Eggers, is a New England folklore film based around a family who have been banished into a forest due to a religious dispute that they got into with the town they were living in at the time. So the father is heavily religious, and obviously his views on Christianity were going against the town's, and back in those days stuff like this is punishable by being banished, and they no longer had access to this little town, so they were very isolated, and they basically lived in a small cabin just outside of a forest. I thought this film was good. Just initial opinions before I delve straight into looking at it deeply. Had very Hereditary-esque vibes. I guess this studio who published these films, A24, really like these high art style movies where they're very slow and they let you get into the whole atmosphere and let it build really nicely up to like a point at the end where a lot of weird stuff happens. Similar to Hereditary and Midsommar, not directed by the same people though. I'm guessing Ari Aster used a few of this movie's themes as kind of like inspiration for his films. So like I say, we follow a family in The Witch. There is the father, so there's the father William, the mother Catherine, the daughter who arguably is kind of the main character, Anna Taylor-Joy, who plays Thomasin, and the two twins. You see, the film deals with isolation really well, in the sense that we don't really see any other characters except the people in the forest, who aren't really shown a whole lot. And obviously being back in those days, being isolated and only having religion to fall back on, you start viewing the devil and stuff like that in a much stronger view. Like, it's difficult to explain because obviously I'm not from the 1600s, 1700s, so obviously with no technology and you're stranded in a remote cabin with your family with nothing to do except hunt and farm, sow, etc, look after your children. And yeah, obviously this plays on isolation heavily. The first thing that happens is that the baby gets taken as Thomasin, I think she's called, is looking after the child, and it gets taken away. Obviously the mother's devastated, and there starts to be a bridge in trust between the mother and Thomasin ever since the child gets taken. Yeah, and the father always has this kind of bond with Thomasin. He kind of doesn't want to believe what is going on around him and wants to trust her and obviously trusts her because she's his daughter, which is fair enough. Yeah, as far as the acting goes, everyone did an amazing job. The mother and father played the role perfectly. They even went as far as Robert Eggers, I'm guessing, wanted everyone to speak in the tongue of like Old English, which was really well done. And at the end of the film it even says like they actually took lines from old poems and old manuscripts that they found from that era. So they really nailed the whole aspect of the language and how people speak. Some people might not like that, in the fact that they have to actually use their brain to process sentences. That might sound a bit patronising, but some people don't have patience. It's like when people don't want to read subtitles for a foreign film. It's like, but it's worth it. But if you can't explain that to them, it's not worth it. It's not worth them watching it. So yeah, you do have to put your mind to use when translating these old English sentences into our English now, because they're quite back to front, and they use a lot of complicated words just to get something straightforward across. The location's stunning. I think it was filmed in Canada, and the forest is so bleak and empty, but so like isolated. It's just amazing. So yeah, like I say, the forest was amazing, and I think the location's choice was perfect for the film setting and everything. The music was really well suited to the film. I loved especially the parts when Caleb, the son, was being entranced by the witch, and he basically had to, and he was just locked, mesmerised. He found the witch's house, very reminiscent of Hansel and Gretel. I'm pretty sure they were referencing Hansel and Gretel in some way. The music was really good and well suited for that scene. There was this like choir and real angelic voice. It was just strange. It was just really well suited for that scene. So a lot of things happen in the film that start the descent into the madness for the family, such as the child dying at the beginning of the film. This obviously plays real heavily on the mother, and just like soon after when Caleb and the father go hunting, they come across a rabbit who has been stalking them, and this rabbit is seen throughout the film on loads of different occasions. For instance, when Thomasin and Caleb go hunting together, unbeknownst to the father and the mother, the hare is there again, and Caleb chases the hare and eventually finds the witch's house, and Thomasin then loses Caleb and finds the father. This is all building up against Thomasin. Like, everything that happens in the film is kind of Thomasin's fault, but they view it in a religious sense that this is all happening. She must have something to do with the devil. She must be a witch. And there's a scene with the two twins who are really annoying, but they play the part well. I mean, there's two twins who have nothing better to do with their time. Down at the lake when Thomasin is washing up the clothes with Caleb, the twins come up and start just pestering Thomasin, and she basically tells the little girl that she is a witch, and that if she doesn't leave them alone and stop annoying them, she'll eat her skin and stuff like this. And obviously this has now traumatised the little girl, and this doesn't help Thomasin in the long run when she's trying to explain that she isn't a witch. Towards the end of the film, Caleb's now been possessed and died because of the witch. She obviously did some devil ritual on him whilst he was in her hut, and then sent him back. The twins then start pretending to be under the same spell in order to get Thomasin kicked out of the family home, or even worse, taken back to the village to be prosecuted as a witch. Obviously she'd get burnt alive, but they are found out eventually when the father kind of savagely lifts one of the twins up and says he's going to bash its skull in. I thought that was quite savage, to be honest. Just shows the isolation of the location and how it can mess with your mind. Yeah, so they get boarded up and left in this little hut out in this little outhouse, and this is with Black Phillip in the same outhouse. And during the night, the witch arrives and starts drinking the milk out of the goat's udder, and takes the twins away with him. And in the morning, the father comes down and sees Thomasin by herself, no twins, in the same place, kind of adding towards her being a witch. So she comes to the father, they have a chat. Basically he's getting really upset because he knows that there's nothing much he can do apart from take her to be trialled as a witch. This is when, just as he's finished speaking to her, he's about to come up to her, Black Phillip headbutts him and sticks him with his giant horns. Apparently Ralph Iverson, who plays the father, actually was injured in that scene and had to be on painkillers because he'd torn ligaments in his stomach being headbutted by the goat. So I just thought that was quite funny. Yeah, he's actually killed and headbutted into the log pile, and this is when the mother comes down, and she's obviously lost all her children. The only one she has left is Thomasin, who is apparently a witch. So she just starts attacking Thomasin and almost kills her, and Thomasin luckily can escape, and she has to kill her own mother. She slices her in the head with this giant blade. I'm not sure what it's used for. Obviously a tool for farming. Yeah, and this is when she then is all alone in the forest now. She's all alone in this hut, and she then approaches Black Phillip, who she basically has no one else left. So she knows that the twins have been speaking to Black Phillip. Whether or not he's been speaking back, we don't know. But she decides to talk to him, and she starts speaking to him, and she thinks, "Oh, he's not going to speak to me. He's just a goat." But then we're focused on Thomason's point of view. We're looking at Thomason the whole time, and the goat speaks to her and starts telling her all these things like, "Do you want to come live in the forest? And do you want to come and see what it's like? You've basically got nothing else, so why not just try it?" And she's obviously mesmerised by the fact of goat speaking to her. We never see the goat speaking, but it's obviously implied. And it even gets as creepy as the goat shape-shifting into a man and walking around the back of Thomason towards the end. I thought that was quite creepy. And she becomes the very thing that she was being accused of. She becomes a witch. She walks into the forest naked and meets a band of witches who are doing a ritual around a fire, and they all start rising up. One of the witches is on a piece of wood to imitate being on a broomstick, I'm guessing. Just picked up on that little reference as well. So yeah, Thomason becomes the very thing that she said she wasn't, becomes a witch. And I think the descent into madness with all the characters, losing everyone, losing who they love, and having to deal with the isolation of being outside by themselves, is portrayed perfectly. It's very dark, depressing, a lot like Hereditary in that sense. The tones are very dark, the cinematography is great, the music is fantastic in parts. There isn't a lot of music in the film, but when it's used really well. I really enjoyed it. I've watched it twice now. The first time I didn't really understand it, the second time I analysed it a bit more. So yeah, I think I'm going to give this film a 9 out of 10. I enjoyed it, it was really good. The story was very simple. It would have been nice to learn a bit more about the witches. It kind of cuts off as we meet a lot of the witches. We only really see one throughout the film. But it would have been nice to kind of meet them all and learn a bit more about them, and maybe to see a few more rituals, but it is what it is. The film as a whole, I really enjoyed it. Like I say, Graves grades, I'll give it a 9 out of 10. So yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next review.